So, welcome to the first episode on Hot Rod Heresy, documenting the build of my 1962 Ford Fairlane. As you can see, it's become a little bit of a catch-all for miscellaneous garage crap, as project cars tend to be, but that'll all get cleared off soon. Not much to look at right now at the moment. I've had this car for going on a couple years. I originally bought it right here in Phoenix, Arizona, based on the background that I know on the car from the previous owner. Supposedly it came out of Minnesota. It was originally white. It had a full color change, door jambs, trunk, underhood, everything. At some point in its life, the guy I bought it from pulled out the original 170 inline 6 and the 3-speed manual, shifted on the column. He got into some Hot Rod 6 stuff, built a 200 for it, built a 250 for it with an Australian crossflow head, and then eventually decided he wanted a V8, so swapped in a carbureted 5-liter Ford engine out of an HO Mustang with a 4-barrel carb and headers, and put a T5 in it. Car's got an SN95 8.8 rear axle. It had 410 gears in it when I got it. A great running car, great driving car. I drove it like that for about a year, and then decided I really just kind of wanted to make the car my own. So pulled the V8, pulled the T5, sold that stuff off, and got a hold of a pretty unique power plant that you don't really see over here in the USA. And that would be the Australian Intech 4-liter single overhead cam 12-valve inline 6-cylinder engine. This engine was a completely stock original engine core that came out of a 1999 Ford Falcon in Australia. It's the AU-series of car. There's various series of the Falcon. Early stuff, you got like XY, that type of thing, that look a lot more like the American Falcons. You get into the cars that had these type of engines in them. They began with the EA series, EB, ED, FEL. Finally, the AU, that was the last iteration of the single overhead cam 12-valve engine, before they moved on to the dual overhead cam 24-valve 4-liter inline 6 engine, known as the Barra. That's been getting a lot of press lately and growing pretty rapidly in popularity, not only in Australia, but also over here in the United States. So I went with the single cam because I've been fascinated with this engine since I first learned about it 6 years ago, and have always wanted to do something with a build on an inline 6 in general. I've never really messed with one before. I've always focused on V8s and that type of thing. So a lot of people kind of look at me funny when I tell them that I've removed the V8 from the car in order to go what they consider backwards to the inline 6-cylinder engine, but I like stuff that's different, hence the channel name, Hot Rod Heresy. I like going outside the box, and I like having something that is unique and that hopefully will remain unique for years to come. So this particular engine was imported by an importer in Washington State, listed it on eBay. A good friend of mine locally bought it and decided he wanted to go different directions with the project, so worked out a deal with him, and I got a hold of the engine. It came complete with the original 4-speed automatic BTR overdrive transmission. Had the fuel injection wiring harness, the factory broadband intake manifold, factory exhaust manifold. I mean, it was a very complete engine. AC compressor, alternator, starter, basically everything. So I stripped it down because I wanted to do a full build on it, and just got the stuff back from the machine shop today. So I've been slowly collecting parts. Had to import some stuff from Australia. You can see the intake manifold. Pretty custom piece. Tunnel Vision Turbocharging out of Melbourne manufactures this, and they're basically one of the leading authorities on the Ford Intech engine, as well as the Barra in Australia. And see, it's got a forward facing throttle body. Take a peek inside there. You can see it's got a fully machined plenum. You can see the tunnel vision logo in there. Nicely machined tapered runners. It's set up for a single set of fuel injectors. Had the valve cover powder coated. Also had the timing cover powder coated. Went with a heavy silver. It's a high gloss. And the oil pan had that powder coated as well. Chuck's Speed and RV Center here in Phoenix, Arizona did all the machine work on the engine for me. Did a fantastic job. Had an unfortunate circumstance with the cylinder head. It's actually a flawed casting, and it was thin in one of the exhaust ports. And we accidentally broke through to water, porting the head just above the short turn radius on the port wall, number 6 cylinder on the exhaust port. So being that the engine is turbocharged, as you can see, exhaust gas temperatures are going to be elevated. This thing's going to see 30 plus pounds of boost. So didn't want to risk an epoxy repair in the hole in the port, and a weld attempt just made the hole worse because the casting is just bad in that port. So the head is unfortunately scrap, but the legends over at Empire Mechanical and Racing in the Sydney area in Australia are hooking me up with another AU-series Intech head off the owner's personal engine that already's made over 1,000 horsepower with rear tires, fully built dill, ported, custom valves, custom cam, rocker gear, the whole 9 yards. So pretty excited to have a proven finished cylinder head that's a known good quantity and that is capable of supporting the amount of power I'm chasing. That should be arriving here probably next week. So this head will just be used for mock-up purposes. The turbocharger is a Borg-Warner SX 400 series 82.2 millimeter billet compressor wheel. It's a T4 flange medium frame turbocharger. 82 millimeter turbine. We have the 6 boost turbo manifold on the engine. Jason over at Tunnel Vision hooked me up with that as well. It's got a 60 millimeter wastegate provision here at the collector, right below the turbo mounting flange. So yeah, that's the basic rundown. The engine will be a full build. I had Manley here in the US build custom forged pistons for me. Also be running a set of their Barra spec XR6 Turbo Tough connecting rods. ARP head studs. Actually, ARP doesn't make a head stud for this engine, so after looking at their offerings, it turns out that a Porsche 3-liter dual overhead cam 944 head stud kit works out to be the right length and thread pitch. So if anybody over here is wanting to build one of these engines, this is the way to go, and you got to buy 2 of the head stud kits to get enough fasteners for this engine. Also got some King Pro Series bearings going on. Had the crank cut 0.25 mil to freshen up the journals. Also had a larger fillet radius put in the crankshaft. Got some ARP head studs. These are actually for the, I apologize, some ARP main studs. These are actually for the dual overhead cam Barra. The AU Intech happens to be able to use the same head stud. Got the main caps there. It's a 7 main journal block, so it has exceptional bottom end strength. And you can see the main caps actually get cross bolted through the oil pan. It's a heavy aluminum casting that's a structural member of the engine. And then I also got a alloy main girdle from Mace Engineering over in Australia. That'll tie all the caps together, help prevent cap walk and twist in the block. And you may notice that I have 2 sets of main bearings, and the reason for that is these engines had a 180 degree thrust bearing. So that means the thrust bearing shell, only half of it featured a thrust surface. That's fine and dandy in an OEM engine with OEM transmission, but this thing's going to get a power glide behind it with a trans brake and a custom converter from Hughes. It's going to have a lot of stall speed. It's going to have higher forward thrust pressures being generated by the transmission and converter, so the thrust bearing in the engine is going to have quite a bit more load in it. So if you buy 2 of these King main bearing sets, you can actually fit 180 degree thrust bearing to the engine block and 1 to the main cap, and get a 360 degree thrust bearing, so you double the thrust capacity in the engine. You can also do a roller conversion on the front main journal of the crankshaft, which I have right here. That requires a little bit of engine block machining and a little bit of crankshaft machining, but don't really have a facility in the local area that can provide that, so we're just going to make do with the regular Babbitt style modded 360 degree thrust bearing, and I'll be drilling through into the main galley for pressurized oil feed to the thrust. Mentioned I had the crank reground earlier, 0.25 mil under, and I had the fillet radius increased. You can see that here where the rod journal meets the counterweight, where the main journals are at. The fillet radius isn't a huge percent bigger than OEM, but it's definitely an improvement. And anything that you can do in that area dramatically strengthens the crankshaft overall. It's a cast iron piece. It's incredibly durable. Guys in Australia routinely make well over 1,000 horsepower at the rear wheels with the OEM Ford cast iron crankshaft, and very few failures. So I feel pretty good about using it. There are aftermarket billet cranks available. It's just not in the budget right now. So that's the scoop. We'll get started on engine assembly here in the next few episodes. We'll be documenting that as well and sharing more notes on the engine build as we go. So if anybody's interested in doing one of these, hopefully that information will be helpful. I appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video, and share it if you like what you're seeing. And tune in next time.